Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Phil. And before we get started, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone on YouTube. We've now hit over 1,000 subscribers. We've now published over 100 videos and we're getting over 100,000 views, which is amazing. So big thank you and big thumbs up to everybody for your support.
Thank you for listening. But on to the meat of the episode. Today we're talking about the armies of Poland. Very much lancers and baby tanks in V2, wasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, a really strong nation in V2, albeit with quite a specialised and specific build. It'd be interesting to see how they're working in V3 with the changes to close combat and close assaults, because obviously the Lancers were very, very tasty in V2, if that was your thing.
Yeah, indeed. And the interesting thing in V2 is they did seem really powerful, but looking at their national characteristics, two of them are bad to pointless, and they only have one that's actually any good. So jumping into it, the first one they had was communications breakdown, which is where in the first turn of the game, if the first order die drawn from the cup is one of yours, the enemy can decide that the dice is put back in the cup and a new ordered die is drawn. It never really affected the outcome of games, that one, does it?
No, it was very rare that you'd use it. I guess it was those sort of situations where you wanted to force your opponent to go first because you were trying to hold back for later on in round one.
Yeah, I think the only time it was worth it is sniper duels. If you brought a Polish sniper, your opponent brought a sniper, you pulled the Polish dice first, they'd make you put it back so that there was a good chance of them getting first shot at your sniper. But other than that, it didn't really feature much. The other one that was pointless, this one rather than bad, was the elite officer class, where all Polish HQ units are fanatic. But obviously this one was pointless because fanatic required more than 2 men, I believe, back in V2. And so as your officer team was going to be maximum 3 men, as soon as you took your first wound where you'd want fanatic, you no longer had fanatic. And so it's pointless.
But it would be great in V3 if you could take the larger HQ squads that we started to see from the armies of Germany onwards.
Yep. And so, like, Germany can do that now, and it finally serves a purpose. So perhaps this rule isn't as bad in V3, so we'll see if they've kept it, I guess. But now onto the actual good rule, which is very Soviet-esque, which was no hope of retreat. Whenever a Polish unit fails a morale check and would otherwise be destroyed as a consequence, take the test again and apply this second result. It applies to all units, including vehicles, which I think the old Soviet, for the motherland, was it?
Yeah, only applied to infantry and I believe artillery. I don't think it applied to vehicles.
Yeah. So it was a great rule against flamethrowers and general just gaming, I guess. But have they retained any of the goodness into V3?
So they have retained the best one. They do still have no hope of retreat. So they can re-roll a failed morale check. That does apply to all units facing this situation, including infantry, artillery, and vehicles that suffer an on-fire damage result. So that is a really good special rule to kick us off with.
Yeah, and it's an exact copy and paste, so there's no dampening of that rule. So a strong start, strong opening gambit there.
Yeah, and to be fair, it keeps going in a good vein. So battlefield knowledge, we've seen this before with some of the other Minor Nation PDFs. There are 3 parts to it. Any Polish unit set up on the table before turn 1 may start the game in ambush, and if you decide to do so, you take the dice out of the bag. Pretty handy if you say you got your snipers out, or if you've got some anti-tank guns or AA guns or howitzers, and you want to start in ambush. That's pretty good. I like that one.
Yeah.
The next 2 are very good, subject to the units that you take in your force. So the second one then, in addition, in the first turn of the game, all Polish infantry units count as having the fieldcraft rule.
Nice.
Cavalry, they're infantry units.
They are indeed, as by my understanding of the rules.
Okay, so that is a really interesting one there, where you can basically ignore rough ground on the first turn of the game.
And jumping back to what we said in our last episode about partisans, where you can now come on in first wave 12 inches up the flank, run through the woods, you're almost guaranteed that 30 inches up the tail by the end of turn 1.
Yep. And if you don't want to do it on turn 1, you can kind of do something, well, not quite similar, but there's another little maneuver thing, which is whereby you ignore the -1 on the order test if you're outflanking. So this basically a lot of maneuverability in the Polish force, and you couple that with the no hope of retreat. So if it goes wrong and you field craft and rush through, or you outflank into a bit of a firefight, and you have to take a morale check because of casualties, you get a chance to reroll. Always a bonus.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually overall. The thing that I've just noticed there with the battlefield knowledge, which like my only complaint with this is it's a bit bland because we've seen it before, but it is good.
Mm.
The attempting an outflank is for all units again,
Mm.
which behind enemy lines is often just infantry. For example, like the Finns, I think just get infantry.
Yeah, like the commandos in V2 and the rulebook in V3, it's only for the infantry units. Yeah, so yeah, all units. So you start outflanking with some little tankettes, for example. That's quite a little tasty tactic too.
And interestingly as well, because now outflank's even more powerful. Outflank's brilliant now because you can come all the way up to the table edge on turn 5. Additional to that, you can come on from your own table edge.
Yes.
And so the rules query here, I can hear what people already thinking, is if I outflank, but then use my outflank to enter from my own table edge like a normal reserve,
yeah.
am I at -1 still? Or am I not at -1? Like, is that an outflanking maneuver to come on from your own table edge from outflank?
Yeah, it is. It's an outflanking maneuver. Obviously, the penalty, if you like, that you pay is that you can't do it in the second turn, whereas if you were in reserve, you can. I had this at the weekend at Three Good Men, where my opponent had outflanked, but because of the way the game had changed, he actually brought them on from his own table edge because they were better served to support and buff the situation that was going on at the time, rather than the initial intention, which I imagine would have been to have outflanked actually genuinely along the flank. But there was a reaction needed closer to his table edge. So yeah, it's an outflank is it's a move rather than a position on the table, if that makes sense. So you've declared an outflank. You can't do it until turn 3 onwards. Even if you bring it on your own table edge, which you can do rules as written, it's still an outflank, not a reserve move.
Exactly, yeah. Because, for example, if demolition's a great one, for your example you were just talking about, where because you want your reserves to hold the back line, and you know you're going to want them to arrive when you want them, but you're not going to need them till late game. Putting them in outflank rather than reserve for your tankettes, for example, great way to just sort of put the odds slightly more in your favor.
Yeah, nice little pro tip there, Johnny. Thank you.
Shall we jump into HQ units? Because we said about partisans fairly standard.
Yeah.
This is standard as well, but it's got a couple more options compared to partisans, hasn't it?
One.
I think you've missed one of them there. I think there's actually two.
Okay, fine. So you point out when I've missed it. Then. So you've got your officer, which can be inexperienced, regular, or vet, up to 2 further men. You can arm them as modelled. Blah blah blah. That's exactly the same. Medic. Do partisans have medics?
No, they just had. Unless my memory's playing tricks on me, I believe they had exactly 2 entries in HQ, which was officer and observer.
Okay, so fine. You get a medic if you want a medic, which is a veteran. You can add up to 2 men to make it a 3-man team. Yeah, the bit that I saw was the next one. Forward observer. You can take air or artillery with the poles. Quite often, what we're seeing with the miners is it's either or, not necessarily both. So
yeah, and it's quite nice. I don't know if you're going to take them. There was a lot of like, let's take FAOs when V3 came out because you got the spotting rule and we weren't seeing much anti-air. There's enough pintles on the table that I think already people are starting to think FAOs aren't necessarily the way to go. And now spotters have been nerfed. I think we're not going to see a lot of FAOs going forward, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, fairly standard, nothing great, but they're equally nothing terrible. So yeah.
And then into the good stuff.
Yes.
The infantry squads. You might have to wait a minute because I think we'll go through sequentially. Shall we start with the best? Which would you prefer?
No, go on. We'll make people wait. We'll go through sequentially. So infantry section, inexperienced, regular or vet, starts at 6 men, add up to 13. So you can take a 19-man unit if you want to.
Nice.
I mean, yeah. You can't give them anti-tank grenades, which is a shame because I've got visions of a 19-man veteran anti-tank squad running around. 1 man can have a BAR, and you can give them engineers for +1 point.
So 2 interesting things here. BARs outside of the US Army, which is quite cool. I actually think BARs are overcosted now. I think 5 points was like the sweet spot where they weren't an auto include, but they were worth taking a lot of the time.
Mhm.
6 points, it's like I might try one, but I'm not recommending people putting them in, I don't think.
I mean, you haven't got an LMG, so if you want slightly greater range than 24, you might consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing that's interesting here, spoiler alert, is we don't have a flamethrower team, but we can still take engineers. So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, maybe so you can charge buildings more easily, but equally you haven't got tough fighters because you
No,
haven't got assault weapons. So
that's what I was going to say. Like, yeah, cool. You can take an engineer platoon and you can ignore the defended position, if you're assaulting a building, but you can't take SMGs and therefore you can't make your own units tough fighter. So I'm not sure if you would want to take Polish engineers.
nah, it's a waste of 5 points. And the thing that, from a mechanics perspective, I can kind of understand wanting everyone to have access to every platoon, especially when the game's just opened. But because the engineer platoon has the same officer, because we didn't get any special rules for platoon specific officers, which I think is a bit of a missed opportunity there, but we'll move past it. Um, and the only other slot is a flamethrower, which you don't have anyway. In essence, it's just a rifle platoon, but with you don't get the other fun stuff like the sniper and the light mortar. So I can't see anyone really running Polish engineers, to be honest.
No, no. So we'll move on to the second option, which is your favorite type of unit in bolt action, which is the motorcycle section. So 6 men on motorcycles, sidecars, is going to cost you 15 points per man at regular, 20 points per veteran. You start with 6, you can add up to 7, so you can have a 13-man little motorcycle display team if you really want to. One of them can have a BAR. Yeah, go for it, Johnny. God, unleash your fury on
Yeah, I
motorcycle
just don't get
sections.
it. Change the points or change the rules. Like
Yeah.
it, because the funny thing is, I actually really like motorcycles, and I'd love to run sort of like a desert motorcycle force
Mm.
or like a early war motorcycle recce platoon
Mhm.
type of force. But horses for 3 points get tough fighter and can shoot their rifles as pistols. You've got a motorcycle which arguably is a maybe it's not, but it's potentially a more stable platform.
Mhm.
And you can't shoot while moving, even if you're just cruising, stick it in neutral and let it roll. Even from the sidecar, which blows my mind. Because if you said that only the BARs, LMGs from the sidecar could fire, and you're paying 2 points more than a horse, I just don't understand. Like, clearly, someone either doesn't get it or hasn't thought about it, would be my reflection on motorcycles. Like, either just make them 2 points and then we might see them. I think rant concluded.
We'll move on to the good stuff. So, anyone that knows anything about Poland in bolt action is waiting for the cavalry section. So, this is 6 men for 78 points regular or 96 points veteran. So, they're costing you 13 points each. Obviously, they're mounted on horses. They've got cavalry carbines, so you can't shoot them as rifles from when mounted. They count as pistols. You can add up to 7, so you can take a 13-man cavalry squad. One may be armed with a BAR. You're not going to do that, let's be fair. But the entire unit may be equipped with lances for plus 1 point per man, which, quite frankly, is ridiculous in terms of the cost versus what you get for it. So if you don't know about Polish lances in V2 or in V3, the lances allow you to get an additional attack in close quarters. You may not fire your carbines while mounted if you've got a lance. You weren't going to anyway, so that's no big shakes at all. And obviously, because you're cavalry, you're a tough fighter unit. So lancers have taken that second close assault dice into V3, and tough fighters got better because you're re-rolling misses rather than hits. So I know people are going to go, yeah, but close combat's worse now, and there's more chance of losing. It's like, not if you're rolling 2 dice per men and you're re-rolling misses.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
I mean, the thing that's worse compared to V2, I'd say, is the longevity of the cavalry charge. Because whereas if you could catch someone on the hop and get to go first, you might wipe them out before they even get to hit you back.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
you're
yeah.
almost guaranteed to lose one horse per charge, which means over the course of a couple of charges, you're probably done as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's insane. And in terms of the funny thing is that, so from a history perspective of bolt action, now again, my memory could be wrong here, but because this is just from memory, but V1 to fighter gave you +1 attack. And so a lance, when this rule was written, what this rule was saying is they are tough fighters, I believe, or it gave them an extra attack beyond a normal tough fighter kind of thing. But it was very much fitting with the vibe of V1 tough fighter.
Okay, yeah.
And then we moved to V2.
But Poland never got rewritten for V2 because it was a V1 army book. Yeah.
And then the lance rule gets the benefit of tough fighter alongside the extra attack, which was tasty, getting to re-roll. We've now got our third iteration of tough fighter, where so in the V3 version of tough fighter, re-rolling failed wounds when you're getting like, let's say, 10 attacks as a minimum for 5 men. You're guaranteed to win most combats, really. So the difficulty obviously is getting them there, but with fieldcraft and V3 DZEs now, you're going to put a lot of pressure on very quickly. And so gun armies, like gunline armies, I think will really struggle against this cavalry type build.
Yeah. Yeah. They are phenomenally good. The other units we've looked at so far are not, but this is a unit to build an army around. What we need to see moving down the list is what you get in terms of support weapons and vehicles.
Yeah. And interestingly, I actually think the vehicles are the main thing, because if I'm going cavalry, I think I want a full mobile force. What I don't want is for my like howitzers to be unsupported. So artillery, I'm not too worried about, but I'm excited to see vehicles. But having said I'm not excited, should we look at artillery?
Yeah, I mean, just before we jump in terms of your infantry teams, it's a machine gun team, an anti-tank rifle team, a mortar team, which can be light or medium. The sniper is a marksman, which is a single man rather than a pair. But effectively, it's a sniper, and machine gun, an anti-tank rifle team, and the mortar.
Interesting. Actually, I would know I was very keen to move on to artillery and jump the gun.
Okay,
But the marksman actually might be worth commenting on here, because V2 snipers, the fact that you're a marksman didn't matter, because if you got sniped by a sniper, you were losing your sniper either way.
Yeah.
V3 snipers, actually the sniper can't snipe a sniper anymore. And so you always have to do both wounds. And so actually, I'm not sure if a 10 points reduction is enough of a reduction to go from 2 men down to 1, now that you'll lose the dice the first time you get sniped, whereas everyone else doesn't.
Yeah, so if you've got a 2-man sniper team in V3, you'll kill the first one, but then the second one picks up the sniper rifle and carries on. If you've been hit by a sniper, yeah. So you obviously you lose the team leader, so you go down a -1 base morale, but you're still getting to fire, albeit without the assistant. It's a good point. Yeah,
yeah. I guess actually at veteran it's a 15 points reduction, and that is a little bit better. And also you're hard to wound then, so maybe it's a veteran version. But I mean, equally, we've said numerous times snipers aren't that good. So, and if you've taken loads of lancers, maybe you don't want to be spending points on marksmen anyway.
Well, you've got too many horses in the way blocking your line of sight. So,
yeah.
So artillery. Let's jump back to that. Howitzers, light, medium, heavy. Add gun shields. Take spotters if they're medium or heavy. Cool. You've got all the ones you wanted there.
Big guns though. Big guns.
Yeah, big guns. Yeah, you don't see many heavy howitzers in the Mind the Nation PDFs. 80 gun, it's light, it's got a gun shield, it's 50 points. Good stuff.
Back to 3 men. Very nice.
Back to 3 men, unlike the Partisans yet. Now the AA one, this is worth calling out. So 35 points regular for a light AA gun on a 360 platform with no gun shield. That's not worth calling out, but you can take a heavy, so you can take a Bofors for plus 15 points. Not every minor nation is, not every nation is getting access to heavy autocannons, so that's quite cool potentially.
That is actually, I might retract what I was saying about not taking guns, because the 360 degree is really good for countering the outflank, because you don't have to choose the arc. And I believe they're not paying for that compared to other nations, are they?
I don't think so. I think 35 points is your basic cost of a light autocannon. Some of them which are 360, some of which aren't. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you're sort of looking for something to hold the back line, bolster your dice count, 35 points for a light autocannon on a platform.
Yeah,
that's not bad at all.
50 points for a heavy autocannon is tasty as well.
Are you always going to go heavy? Are you?
It depends how many horses are bought.
Ironically, I was thinking the opposite, where more horses means I probably need the heavy
Mm.
for anti-tank. Whereas if I've taken less horses and more tanks, the light is sufficient, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Okay, vehicles. There's a lot. There's actually, a good amount of options here. Compared to other minor nations. So we'll start with the tankettes and light tanks. So your basic one, which is the TKS tankette, 65 points. It's armor 7 with recce, and it's got a hull-mounted medium machine gun. You're not going to take that, I would hazard to say. But what you are going to do is upgrade it and give it a hull-mounted light autocannon for 20 points. So for 95 points, you're getting a armor 7 recce light autocannon. And these things are tiny as well. So you can hide them pretty much wherever you want to, which is always handy and helpful.
Hard to get line of sight on the enemy, though, if you're behind a...
Yeah, you can't shove them behind a wall and go, well, I've got I've got cover, if you can't actually see over the wall because your vehicle's so small. But yeah.
Did you say 95 points there or 85?
85 points.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. I think there's definitely a place for spam a lot there.
Yeah, and you can also take the Vickers E-type light tank, which is basically it's a little 2 medium machine gun tank. So this is quite a complex one. So you start with 65 points regular for your TKS tankette. You pay 25 points to make it the Vickers E-type, which gains a light anti-tank gun with a coaxial medium MG, loses recce but gains vulnerable. So that is now 90 points for a light anti-tank vulnerable tankette. And then if you want to, you can then drop it by 35 points. So we're going down to what?
55, because we've gone up 25, down 35. The difference is down 10, if you know what I mean.
That's how maths works. And this is your double MG gun turrets, which actually is pretty cool. 55 points for a double MG little tankette. That's pretty cool.
Oh, interesting here. I think there's a bit of a rules whoopsie, because for whatever reason, they've decided to compress everything down to make it as complex as possible. The TKS has recce. Vickers in most nations, I don't think gets recce.
No, it doesn't. So, and that's right.
Oh, but does it say replacing the recce rule? Missed that in the middle. Yeah, see that. Yeah.
You lose recce and become vulnerable, and then it's a choice of, do you want to take a light anti-tank gun or a double MG?
If we can do a sidebar here, one thought I've got here, which is unrelated to Poland specifically, but is related to the miners, is because we're not printing this as a company, there is no additional cost to not compressing the units.
Yeah.
And I can see an argument for compressing the units to save people's printing at home. I can see that argument. But I think most people would rather not have completely different vehicles compressed into a single confusing entry and would rather have 1 or 2 extra pages that they have to print themselves, especially because I think a lot of people running the mines will probably run it from like iPads anyway, in which case there's definitely no cost. So why don't they just spread it out?
Yeah. I mean, on the app, it works. And I've kind of answered your question there, which is, if you want to subscribe to the app, then you get all these options without all this complicated clicking the boxes and so on.
Yeah, but I mean, for your old school players who like to do things by hand, but also even just for people who are thinking about an army, what you want to do is you want to flick through the army list and get excited about specific units. Like, oh, I wonder what the rules are for this specific tank I found. And what you don't want to do is spend a minute finding the tank in another tank's entry and then doing mental maths to work out, is it stupidly overcosted, undercosted, or is it about what I wanted it to be so that I can build my army around this tank? Just that's my... And the funny thing is, actually, I'm hoping at some point, rather than errattering the minor PDFs, we just could re-release them as well. And at that point, hopefully we'll take that feedback on board and just spread it out a little bit, even if not fully.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, there isn't a lot. Well, yeah, there's not a huge amount of point of erratering the PDF if you can just
Republish it.
change it and republish it as version 2, bolt action 3rd edition version 2 PDF or whatever. Yeah.
Well, you just put the date at the top, don't you? Same with the FAQ, and you just check the date at the top to make sure you're reading the right FAQ rather than numbering the FAQs. But should we move back into what we advertised, which was Armies of Poland?
Yeah, so we're on to one of your favorite tanks in V2, and I'm probably imagining in V3 as well, which is the Renault FT. So anyone who plays France will know this. I mean, for 30 points regular, you're getting an Armor 7 medium machine gun. That's great. Cost you 50 points to get it in as a team that can't move.
It's a shame that we've obviously got half shots, but because it's so cheap, you can kind of accept that.
You can buy 2 for 60 points, and
yeah, and then you've got twice the dice.
You've got twice
the same number of shots for 10 points extra.
And they're Armor 7. Why wouldn't you?
That's actually a really good point. You know, when you put it in that context of, for 50 points you can have a machine gun team, which could be shot by rifles, and it gets twice the shots as the tank. Over 10 points more, you get half the shots of the machine gun team per tank, or the same shots across both tanks, and you put out an extra pin. Great shout. Yeah.
If you want to make it a low velocity like anti-tank gun, you pay an extra 30 points for it. It has got the one-man turret. It is not just slow; it's pitifully slow. But yeah, they're so cool, aren't they? I mean, they're just cool little vehicles. We've seen a few. I think there's one at Warzone Atlanta, wasn't there, where somebody took an absolute ton of these, called it the snail build.
Well, Mad Bob once did it at a thematic event, because there is, I can't remember the exact engagement, but I think the French actually did this at one point in World War II, put down a whole, I think it was while they were in retreat. All these FTs came storming out together to basically as a delaying maneuver. And so he reenacted that with a ridiculous number of FTs.
Yeah, I mean, storming is a relative word because they are pitifully slow, but I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, a delicate storm.
Yeah, they're cool. The Renault R35, again, it's the same as the French one, isn't it? It's 110 points regular for Armor 8. You get a low velocity light anti-tank gun. You get a forward-facing hole-mounted medium, so not a coax, so you get a chance to put 2 pins out. One-man turret, slow, armored all round, which is always good, but it is a low velocity.
Yeah, I like the R35 partly for the armored all round, and also I think it's a very tanky tank, if you know what I mean. Like, you put it on the table and it is a tank.
It's a tank. Yeah,
it's not like the tankettes. They're quirky, and I like them from that perspective. That it's like, oh, what's that? But it's not as tanky.
No, you're right there. The Hotchkiss H35, again, it's one of the French tanks. 105 points regular, low velocity light anti-tank gun, coax medium, 8+ tank. It's 5 points cheaper. Okay, so it's 5 points cheaper because it doesn't have one-man turret or slow, but it also doesn't have armored all round. Okay.
Yeah, so you're getting a reduction of armored all round, but obviously that's armored all round must be worth 5 points more than slow one-man turret combined, I guess.
Yeah, do you reckon it's 5 points per thing?
No, I think armored all round
too clear cut.
If armored all round was worth 15, one-man turret and slow was worth 5 each, that would work. But the other thing that we haven't factored in there is the double weapon systems, because you've got coax versus 2 separates. So maybe what you say is one-man turret, but with 2 separate weapons, is worth the same as coax without one-man turret. And then you say there's, I don't know. I'm sure at some point someone will release a how to build vehicles for bolt action PDF.
Mr. Humble looking at you. Yeah. And then the last one we've got is a 7TP, which is 115 points regular. It is a light anti-tank gun with coaxial medium machine gun, armor 8. You can you can replace the AT single turret with 2 separate medium machine guns. It is vulnerable. So effectively, what you're getting at best an armor 8 tank, and then it's a question of, do you want it to have a low velocity light anti-tank gun? Do you want it to be armored all round and all slow? Or do you want it to just be a regular 8+ light anti-tank gun?
Yeah, interestingly, the 7TP is basically a direct comparison to the Vickers, isn't it? It's got the same weapon platform effectively,
Yeah,
but armor 8 rather than armor 7. And points wise, it's 90 versus 115 for a light anti-tank
correct.
and 80 for the TP versus 55. So it's like a 30-point difference for the extra one
Yeah,
armor rather.
armor. Yeah, yeah. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, there's some good options. Without even hazarding a guess, I know the answer. You're going to see tankettes, and you may well see the Renault FTs. I'm not sure how many you're going to see of the other ones, unless you're doing a particular theme and really trying to stick to a particular order of battle and so on.
Yeah, I think all the tanks are all right. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
unlike some armies, they're all like there's none of these that someone might put down or I might pick where
Mhm.
I'd think, oh, that's the one that I shouldn't have put in. Actually, I shouldn't have taken that one for my army list. They
Yeah,
all do a different job, and yeah.
yeah. Your armored car vehicle. So this is 70 points. It is the WZ-34. It's 7 plus. It's got recce and it's got a turret mounted medium machine gun. You can do quite a lot if you want to it.
Yeah, we've got enough options on this one, haven't we?
You've got a lot of options, yeah. There's quite a few. You can replace the turret with a turret mounted low velocity light anti-tank gun and a turret mounted rear facing medium machine gun and a hull mounted rear facing medium machine gun, getting the too many jobs special rule for 30 points.
So 100 points total.
Yeah. Now you can make the vehicle tracked or half tracked, sorry. So the WZ-34 is wheeled. You can turn it into a half tracked WZ-28 for free.
Okay.
Or you can replace the turret mounted medium machine gun on either the WZ-34 or the WZ-28 with a low velocity light anti tank gun for plus 30 points.
So the original version can become a half track and then it can upgrade to a light tank gun. Or if you
Yeah,
don't make it a half track, you can have the too many jobs because you got a ridiculous number of guns rule.
exactly. Yeah. So you turn it into a WZ-29 USURS, which has too many weapons and too many jobs. So the too many jobs rule, combining the roles of commander gunner for two different weapons and loader together, means it's hard to do different things at once. To represent this, it's always necessary to make an order test when issuing an advance order, even if the tank is not pinned. So that's like the one man turret rule. But in addition, the vehicle may fire either the main gun or the turret mounted medium machine gun in the same turn, but not both. So that's the rear facing medium machine gun. So that's like the Japanese tanks, isn't it? In V2, where some of them you couldn't fire, if I'm right to say this, you couldn't fire the main forward facing gun and the rear facing machine gun at the same time for some of them, I believe.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a shame because you paid points for the weapons. You having to
Which you,
take a test every time. Because I was thinking what would be cool for this, because you've got your guns all pointing in different directions, let's say. Outflank where you're going to be taking a test anyway.
yeah.
So you just end up in the middle of a big mess of a fight already that's happening and
Yeah.
shoot three guns in three different directions. Because you've actually only got two guns technically, and one of them's facing backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not a fan of this at all, really.
No, no. I mean, it's got recce, which is cool, but the TKS tankette's got recce and light autocannon. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've just had a thought actually on that outflank, jumping back to the R35, which is
Mm-hmm.
because you don't get the -1 to outflank,
Yeah.
and because it's got the low velocity gun,
Yeah.
outflanking an R35 might be quite a good idea because it's slow anyway. It
Yeah.
gets you up close to something you want to hit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
problem with outflanking a tank is often you end up exposing either your side or your rear if you've come in from the side directly, but you're armored all around. So actually, if you're thinking about outflanking tanks, the
Mm.
R35 might be the one for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good shout. Good spot. Okay.
But is that all of our vehicles? All of our fighting vehicles, rather.
Yeah, all of our fighting vehicles. I'll very quickly run through the transports to tows. You can take a half track truck, which is 7 plus, up to 6 men. This would be great if you could take infantry with SMGs, because you stick dudes with SMGs into a 7 plus armored carrier, but you can't. So
But
there
the
we go.
options might tempt you.
Okay, so you can add a pintle medium machine gun, but then you lose all transport capacity. So you turn it into an armored car. Or you could increase the transport capacity to 12 men.
I'm not bothered about that. But I thought it was the first one was the interesting one where basically if you want some flak on an armored platform,
Yes. Yeah.
61 points. I mean, I don't think it's a great price to be paying compared to the other stuff in the list, but it's certainly something you could do.
Yeah, it does give you flat because, to be fair, I'm just scanning back up the list. I don't think, yeah, there's no pintles anywhere else, and there's no flak weapons baked into any of the units. So yeah, that gives you your flak. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's either that or take AA guns. And
yeah.
if you knew that your particular local scene ran a lot of FAOs and you didn't
Hmm.
want to run static guns, it's the only other way to get AA. So that was what I thought
Yeah,
was worth shouting out.
yeah. I guess if you want to do your fully mobile force of cavalry with
Half tracks.
with half tracks, yeah, you can. You've got your Prince 302 field car, which is a soft skin 6+, up to 6 men. You can turn it into a MG field car, basically, losing all capacity for plus 20 points. So 41 points for a soft skin MG. But you're not going to do that because you're going to take your FT because it's cheaper and it's armored 7.
Same argument though. If you didn't want to pay 61 points for flak and armor 7, you could pay 41 points for flak. And
True.
actually, a platoon of these for, let's say you took 5 of them for 200 points to give yourself a flak platoon, basically.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
yeah,
too
yeah.
bad.
You've got to have the units though to make these things eligible because they're transports.
No, no, they lose their capacity.
Oh, sorry, I see what you mean. So you take a armored platoon of these as your little mobile flak. Got it. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you
yeah,
take, rather than taking, what you could do, let's say you want to still run your tankettes, but
yeah.
you need some flak cover, you run your 4 cavalry squads as 2 platoons, and then 4 tankettes, 4 jeeps. You're probably getting towards your points limit there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, cool. And if you really want to, you can take a tractor. You can take a half-track tractor with no weapons, no transport capacity, but it can tow any weapon, any artillery piece or gun or whatever.
I'm guessing this features because there isn't a half-track tractor in the common vehicles. Because as soon as we started this transport section, I thought this is very like what's already in the book for
Mm.
common vehicles. But obviously, we had those replaced transport capacity options, which we actually really wanted for partisans in the last episode. The tractor does feature in the main book, but I don't think it's a half-track version, is it?
I believe it's not. Yes.
Field ambulance, light truck, wheeled. Yeah, the one in the book's wheeled. That's why. And it's the same price, to be fair, 15 points. And that is everything for Poland, apart from, as discussed, you can, even though we've got transport options, you can still add the common vehicles from the big rule book. So if there was something you were missing, like, I don't know, a truck, for example, with wheels.
It's the class. I mean, the light. If you don't mind soft skins, the light truck in the core rule book, which takes 8 men, which is often a good size, and allows you to take a Pintle MG, so you get your flak as well. That's a really good option. As just as a general bog standard truck. Yeah.
Yeah. I was, interestingly, in the other ones where you don't have transports, it sort of states common vehicles only
Mm-hmm.
as an entry, as though it's an entry in its own right that allows you take those common vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of makes you think, oh, maybe you can't here, but obviously you can as per the big rule book.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought that was just a quirky thing that they've bothered to add common only to the other ones.
So Poland overall, they're really good. And the reason why I'm pausing and struggling a bit here is because it's like kind of like First World War interwar tactics. I'm going to take a load of cavalry. I'm going to take a load of very small, lightly armored metal things with autocannons, and I may well take some static autocannons. But actually, they're really good in bolt action, even in V3. I know close assaults are not the auto kill, etc. But they might as well be when there's a bunch of dudes with lances rolling twice and re-rolling misses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, their V3 national characteristics glow up they've had
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
really
Mm-hmm.
nicely synergizes with the cavalry specifically.
Yeah.
And like that exact build we always saw in V2, that in particular has made them more powerful than they were or at the
Mm.
very least as powerful. But my thoughts were like, it's nice that we've got something different.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
shame that really, if you do want to run them sort of for a tournament in a competitive fashion, you're really only leaning one build, aren't you?
yeah. I've seen them. I think I've seen about five or six Polish lists now in proper V3 kind of competitive events, and they're basically the same. And that's not a criticism of the people that took them. It works. You're going to build them in a certain way, and why not, kind of thing. But you're right. They don't have a huge. Well, they don't really have much flexibility at all at that kind of like really high end competitive level. And I guess from a thematic perspective, because it's the PDF and it's a get you buy list, there's not a huge amount of options here. I hope that we see when the books come out, maybe in some kind of Commonwealth book or something, or maybe I don't know where it would fit. But what I want to see is late war Polish options.
Well, I think Armies of Poland, like again, like we said with Partisans,
Mm-hmm.
just do it as its own book, even if it's thinner and like
Mm-hmm.
slightly cheaper because you haven't got as much to put in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would rather have that with more options than have it squeezed into a different book.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, the compendium's a good example, isn't it? It's quite a small book, but it sells at a reasonable price, and that could be the kind of thing, the sort of size that we're looking at for some of these smaller nations having standalone books.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of the old world where you have the arcane journals, which they're quite small, but they add some nice detail to the factions that you can take, and I can kind of see something like that being popular potentially for V3.
Yeah. For me, what I was really hoping with V3 is to keep it streamlined book wise. The amount of campaign books that I own from V2
Mm,
is like fun, but it starts to get a bit absurd when you start like grabbing a unit from here and grabbing a unit from here. And that's not just because you're being super competitive. That's just because like there's multiple, like D-Day, for example. I could, what, maybe four books in V2 I could take
three.
units from. Well, and the army book is what I was thinking.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You
Yeah,
see
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? I could take my core list from the army book and then grab one unit from each of the three D-Day books that would
Yeah.
thematically fit still because it could be in amongst that force. Um, and I was really hoping we just get big fat chunky books so I don't have to buy Armies of Poland plus the
Yeah,
Polish
yeah,
supplement
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. Hmm.
That was my only thought on that. But
Yeah.
even if you fill the book with a lot of history, but I can play the nation I want at every point in the war that it actually
Mm,
fought at. That'd be brilliant. I
yeah.
don't mind having half a book of history if I get every single point in the war that they fought.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Cool. Um, yeah, and it's I think jumping back to our point about like there's one build,
Hmm.
that again comes down to the fact that we've got these universal national characteristics that we've thrown in, and they happen to fit the particular build that this army is good at.
Hmm.
Whereas if they'd had unique characteristics, you could have tailored them to either do that if you wanted people to do that, or you could have deliberately given them something good that meant the other swing, as it were, was was sort of on par with the cavalry. Like you get the cavalry, but it doesn't pair well with your national characteristics, or you
Hmm.
build it another way which pairs better with your national characteristics, but you don't use the cavalry then.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to build some lancers and Phil?
I'm not, but if I did want to, if I wanted a new army, Poland are a good shout, particularly if what you like is running around on horses with the tankettes. They are a really nice build. If you run down like your bolt action to the checklist for competitive play, have you got autocannons? Yes. Have you got cheap tankettes? Yes. Have you got cheap tankettes with autocannons? Yes. Have you got indirect HE? Yes. Have you got some infantry which are pretty tasty? Yes. What is not to like?
Exactly, yeah. And as much as I was a bit like, oh, there's only one build, so this is boring, potentially, the counter to that argument is yes, all the Polish tournament lists might be the same, but when you go to a tournament, you don't see that many Polish lists. Whereas
Yeah.
in V2 British,
Mm-hmm.
you are seeing lots of British lists with the same units repeatedly, and that got dull I think the fact that Poland only has one build isn't the same as that because there'll only be one or two players there with Poland. And
Mm.
so actually, you're not going to get sick of playing it over and over again. I think when you do play it, especially if you've not played it before, it's going to be a fun little brain teaser for you how you counter the cavalry and the tankettes at the same time and sort of protect these assets, but then threaten it with this. And it will be a very different game of bolt action compared to the other ones you played that weekend, which I think is always a good thing.
Yeah, I was just reflecting about this over the weekend on the way back from Three Good Men, and just thinking about the minor nations we've covered so far. Poland are definitely a very viable tournament list. The Finns are, Hungary are, Bulgaria potentially are as well, and that's also on top of at least three of the five majors, maybe not all five currently, but at least three of the majors. So it isn't like maybe towards the back end of V2 where we really were seeing four, maybe five nations kind of repeated. I do think there's more options now and therefore more variety in what you play, certainly at the bigger events. It might not happen at the smaller events because just because of who attends them, may be focusing on the more easily accessible nations. But those bigger events, I think you're going to see Poland, you're going to see Italy, you're going to potentially see France, see the Finns, see Hungary, etc., alongside US, Germany, Soviets, some Brits, some Japanese. I'd like to see more because I do think Japan is a good shout as well for V3, and we'll come on to that down the line.
Yeah. Do you think, interesting there, because basically what we're saying now is that there's not one nation that's significantly better than the other nations anymore, or a handful of nations, etc.
Correct. Yeah.
We're making an argument here that the nations feel a lot more balanced than they were.
Yes.
But then the question at the end of this summary is, do you think the price we've paid for that is blandness? And like the reason why they feel a lot more balanced is because they all have the same rules or very similar variations on a theme.
Yeah, and maybe not so much the rules. I will have a think about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in an episode or two's time because we're going to be looking at tournaments in V3. I don't necessarily think it's the national rules. It's just that there are certain builds that work in V3, and you can do those builds in across different nations. So I think that is why the blandness is about the structure of the build, if there is blandness, as opposed to the nations that are being taken. But that genuinely is a whole other episode.
So what you're proposing is that it's not because we've removed a lot of quirky national characteristics that potentially caused imbalance. Because essentially, I can't think of any quirky national characteristics now for V3. It's not that.
It's the opposite.
It's the fact that the platoon structure allows you to take whatever you want, and there's enough options in every list now that basically everyone can play the same game.
Yeah. If and I said it a few minutes ago, bolt action checklist. Have I got autocannons? Have I got autocannons on tankettes? Have I got tankettes? Have I got armored vehicles? Have I got squads of SMGs? Have I got indirect fire? If you want to go to an event and or just play with your mates and do well, tick 4 or 5 of those boxes, you're sorted.
The funny thing, actually, going all the way back to a V2 conversation we had about free units, when we're talking about the French specifically, and them getting the free howitzer, and one of our proposals was, okay, they've got a lot of artillery, you get an extra slot, but it doesn't have to be free. And actually, I do wonder if we start to play that game with V3, where let's say the French can take 5 howitzers, not just 4, if that would start to cause a bit of divergence in the lists again, where people are trying new quirky builds.
Mm. Yeah. Potentially, yeah.
Although, having said that, once you've got 5 vehicle slots,
you spend
would
half your
adding
points.
would adding a 6th vehicle slot really change much for anyone? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, cool. So, where can I get Polish models and Phil? Warlord?
Yeah, so in terms of like Lancers and so on, Warlord, there's definitely going to be some 3D prints and STLs out there that you could use. But yeah, Warlord have got a range of variety of Polish cavalry and also the infantry and all the support weapons, etc.
Yeah, it's funny. The cavalry is a topic that I'm seeing coming up more again in the forums and the Facebook
Mm.
posts, etc., about how to build cavalry specifically, because there seems to be like a real, I don't know, like a desert. If you go to the cavalry shelf of the bolt action store, as it were, it's just empty. There's not a lot of options for cavalry World War
No,
II themed from
correct.
any manufacturers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so one of the things that you often see coming up, so it's worth us saying, just for anyone who's thinking, aha, is using the Civil War
Yeah.
horse set, and then putting basically you cut the bodies off halfway up. You get you get legs that are close enough that at the bottom of a bloke, you don't really notice the fact that the legs aren't in the right uniform.
Hmm.
And you then take a little uniformed torso and bang it on top. Now I've done that myself for German cavalry in V2, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. Like it wasn't difficult, but it was very time consuming. And so I immediately gave up on a full force and just built one squad.
Yeah, I did 16 for the Welsh Open last year, and we'll drop a video. Sorry, we'll drop a photo into these videos. But yeah, that was very much a case of getting the Dremel out, cutting the Perry ACW guys in half, cutting the Japanese guys in half, sticking them together, getting the green stuff out to hide the join, model the tunics and so on. A lot of work. They look cool. I mean, yeah, they're my own models, I would say that, but they look cool. But it was a lot of work to do that.
Actually, additional point here. Where are you getting your lancers from?
So if I was going to do the Polish Lancers, I mean, I don't know what I would use for the upper torso, but I'd be looking at brass rods,
Yeah, do it like
basically.
properly from
Yeah,
scratch rather than
yeah. I wouldn't be trying to find a kit which had guys in World War II uniform with lances. I'd be making the lances out of brass rod and cutting it to size.
yeah. And I think a lot of people just because all of your horses are going to have lancers,
Mm.
there's not a risk of confusing one squad for another. And so I think a lot of people, having done the conversion from scratch, they're quite happy not to put the lancers themselves on and just
Yeah,
tell their opponent, by the way, everyone has a lance. It's
yeah,
telescopic. They've got it in the holster.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Having said all of that about converting and using the Perry ACW ones, if you prefer metal or you don't want the hassle of converting, check out Warlord's Polish options. And if you want to, do please use our affiliate link in the description.
Great show, Phil. As ever, thank you for listening. Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.